Hey, Nameless Game Dev here. I wanted to talk about this Minijam I joined a couple weeks ago called Poison. This is the Minijam 129. I really like these Minijams. They're 3 days long. It's got a really good group of people. This one was really interesting to me. I had a couple great ideas and I just sort of jumped right into it. 72 hours is actually really not a lot of time to make a game, especially a 3D game. I learned a lot by only having 72 hours. I actually had to throw away some ideas, some, illusions of grandeur of having, cutscenes and maybe full animation sets. And I really had to boil it down to just really simplified parts. Luckily, this game jam you can turn in late, and I did, and they do deduct points, but at the same time, I really just wanted to join in and have some fun. Talking quickly about the heads-up display, in the bottom center are the health bar, which is like a typical health bar. There's also like a toxicity bar, which grows over time, and when it's full, you end up dying and turning into a toxic Xeno. As well, the top bar is how much energy your weapon has. On the bottom left are the two pickups that you find in the game. As well, on the bottom right will be a list of available pickups in a container. You're looking at the main menu. It implements a pause system, which is actually quite easy to implement in Godot. As well, there's a volume bar that you can control the volume with of the music and sound effects. I have that saved to a file, so when you reload the game, it shows back up. I have some eerie music I got from a Humble Bumble purchase, and that's what's playing right now. I think it was called PM Cinemascape 2, but these are just kind of like horror related. So as you can see, I have a really simple player model. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I ended up reusing this for the enemy model as well. If you're curious, I'm using the Godot game engine. I think this is a great game engine. I haven't really done too much 2D stuff other than UI work, but I hear it's great for 2D. I really like it for 3D. Find it has really simple and straightforward concepts, and they sort of carry these concepts through almost every single part of the engine. And so when you find something new that you need to learn, you can almost always rely on the same sort of conceptualized ideas. So for this player model, as you can see, there is a collision shape, which is really simple. It's just like a cylinder almost. We call it a capsule collision shape. This is an interactable area 3D box. So it doesn't have physical parameters where it creates physical collisions or anything like that. What it does is if you walk up into something, let's say like a door, it will create a trigger so you can open the door using the interact button. I have a kind of complex animation tree, I would say. I probably should have used a state machine instead of all of this and lots of code. But I didn't know how to do a state machine at the time, and I was sort of rushing to make this. And even this, I didn't really have a good grasp on. So it was kind of fun learning about this while I was doing it. But there's really not too many things you want to be learning about while you're making a game in a mini game jam, because there's really not a lot of time to just sort of spend on tinkering. So the player in this game has two health bars. Let me see if I can pull that up actually. The player has two health bars. One is health itself, like being hurt, you lose health, healing, you gain health, and it also has a toxicity level. So as this grows, the more toxic you get, the closer you're becoming to toxic. And once you become toxic, you lose the game. Other characters will also become toxic, and once they turn toxic, they attack you. This top level here, as you can see, this top status bar is how much energy you have. There's only one thing you can use to attack people with, and it's an AED or a defibrillator. And with that, you can shock people, basically. If you've ever seen a defibrillator in TV or whatever, they take the two paddles and they rub them together and then they shock someone back to life. Well, in this case, you use it and you attack people with it. So when you start to become toxic, you start to hold your head and you know you're getting sick. And that's kind of like an indication to the player that they're about to turn, so they better use something to reduce their toxicity. Here's my running animation. I think it's actually pretty good. I didn't really have a lot of time to put into it, and it came out pretty good for how much time I put into it. Only a few minutes in reality. I made all these models and animations in Blender, if you're curious. So when you get really hurt, eventually you start to slow down, and then you start to sort of gimp around a little bit as if you have like a broken leg. I'm not really proud of this animation. It's pretty bad, Mostly this leg that's dragging is not dragging enough, and I think it needs to be sort of like twisted as if like you broke your ankle or something. Um, but you know, it is what it is, and I never went back to clean up this animation. I just sort of ran out of time, to be honest. I also have death animations. I actually two death animations. This is one, and then I actually blended another one just to give some diversity. If you fall forward or you fall backward. It's really simple. I also have a hurt animation, which is really just you get pushed back a little bit. And then I have an attack animation, which is really not great. It's really quick. It's probably about 2 to 3 frames. And you just pull up your hands to shock somebody. Now, if you're curious what it means by shocking someone, when you pick up the AED, you wear it on your back like this. It's attached to the spine bone in the skeleton. And it even has a little light here. And when you run out of charge for the AED, the light will actually turn off, which I thought was a pretty cool little touch. So when you're about to use the AED, you will have them in your hands like this. And really, this is actually the same exact model as this, just scaled way down. I really didn't have time to make any other stuff, so I just threw it together like that. And I thought, hey, that looks pretty good, because, you know, when you're playing, you're about this far away from the player, so you can barely see what he's doing. So these little minute details really don't matter at all. Now, when you have this on and you have these paddles out and you go to interact with like a container, let's say, the paddles will disappear. I'll actually show you some of this code now, actually. So I have a lot of state variables holding on to like what's going on, who has what, how is it working. But I also have a lot of animation variables. You know, how to play the animation, when to play the animation. I even started to hard code how to blend the animation, what speeds to put them at. And I think that was probably not the best thing to do. I probably should have just cleaned it up in Blender, but it seemed the easiest thing to do at the time. So the enemy of the game is actually called a Xeno, and the Xeno is kind of like a xenomorph, I guess. It's a person that sort of went crazy and turned into like a wild person, and they just attack you on sight. While they're in this crazed state and they're starting to turn, as long as they haven't turned, they'll just kind of follow you around, but they won't attack you. So right here we can see it's in the crazed state. This is the same exact model as the player. It looks just the same, but it's a different color. If we open up the animation tree, we can see it has lots of animation states that we go through. Some of the important ones are, is it crazy or is it already fully toxic and it's a Xeno? And I sort of pumped up the animation speed when it becomes a Xeno, sort of to create like this sense of urgency. Now when it's running in a regular state, it'll do that hurt walk as if it's about to die. You know, it's sort of like limping around. It's not in a great state, but it's not going to attack you. Now, when it's in a crazed toxic state, it'll run like a wild person. And it really kind of creates these heart pumping situations where you see it just sort of scattering after you out of, you know, the corner. And it, you know, this is a horror game, so it kind of has your blood pumping a little bit. I have a couple basic animations, such as when you get hurt, it shows like a little hurt animation. Before, I probably should have reordered these actually. Before it turns, what can happen is every character in the game will eventually become too toxic and die. So when this character becomes too toxic, it'll have a little animation that goes down into that running state, or rather that poised state to run, just like that. And then while it's in this state, you can also have a few different animation states for death. This is the simple death animation. I'm kind of proud of it. And then there's also a front-facing animation. It has pretty similar code, except I also added in things that will help it, you know, basically follow the player, find the player. Each Xeno also has a certain amount of, you know, things in their pockets. Either there's two items you can pick up basically: a syringe or a neural, which will reduce your toxicity. And every Xeno basically will start with one or the other or nothing, and it's totally random. And so when you kill a Xeno, you can actually loot the body and see what they have. All right, well that about wraps it up. It's a real short, small level. I'll show you a quick playthrough just to see what kind of like I put together and how you might want to play the game. It's real short and simple. I kind of want to build more on it, but I have some other bigger projects I've been working on, and this is like sort of a side project, little mini getaway for game development, if you will.